recently, we got new information from the official Naruto website. We're talking about the Boruto databook. And in that databook, we got some new information about Boruto's flying Rajin jutsu. So we have it up here. New news. Let's take a look at this. We're going to read the entry and then we're going to give our thoughts. Of course, we're joined by Barbie Free Game. I'm your humble host, Mello. Let's talk about it. Okay, so the Boruto database, Flying Raijin Jutsu, is a classification ninjutsu, and it states a teleportation ninjutsu that Boruto's grandfather, the fourth Hokage Minato Namikaze, was famous for using, can teleport to specific points that have been previously marked. So this is not like new information, this is stuff that we already knew, right? So if we scroll down a little bit here, not only do we get a pretty cool visual of the manga panel, but we also get some more new information that I think is going to be the relevant portion here. So it says, with the help of Kashin Koji, that part's huge. That part's pretty big. With the help of Kashin Koji, Boruto develops his own variant of the technique, which could technically be considered an entirely separate jutsu. So this is some big brain generational talent stuff here. Compared to Minato Namikaze's Flying Raijin Jutsu, has more limitations, so that could be a downside for some people, but we're going to talk about it here. What do you guys think about this?
Well, the first thing I think about is the limitations. I know Kashin Code is probably going to be like a big portion of this too, but like thinking about some of the limitations, well, originally one of the reasons why I definitely wanted Flying Raijin to potentially come back is because it's one of those jutsus that could be effective no matter how strong the opponent is. It's like a exact precise thing. You like disappear and you go directly to another spot instantaneously. Like, so speed wise, it's pretty much going to hold up in most other instances. But I do want to see specifically what are the limitations. Is it going to be like you can't necessarily mark things like how Minato marked it? And we kind of had a conversation yesterday on the pod how it could just be like trinkets that Boruto's able to teleport to and not necessarily just flat out marking. So it could be like limited in regards to like how much marks Boruto could potentially put, because he doesn't really have as much trinkets like that as like Minato had, like just regular random marks he could just lay down. So that could be interesting. I do want to see like how it is. The limitations going to be like a bad thing for Boruto? Now obviously limitations in itself, it seems like it's going to be a bad thing, but I want to see exactly how impactful those limitations are actually going to be, because you could have like a limit, or Boruto can't have a limitation, but it's possible that it just won't actually come up. Like for example, Damon has a limitation, and that right there in itself hasn't necessarily come up a lot. So I do want to see exactly how impactful the limitations are. But from what I've seen with Boruto's Flying Raijin, like I haven't necessarily seen that much limitations. Like Boruto did talk about how he wasn't necessarily as adept with the jutsu as like Minato, even though I don't necessarily think, I don't really take that statement too seriously, because Minato kind of said the same thing with Jiraiya when it comes to Sage Mode, even though Minato had like perfect Sage Mode. So I do want to see exactly how Boruto is like limited with the Flying Raijin, but as I said, I haven't seen too much limitations with the Flying Raijin. They've been going from dimension to dimension, from Hidden Leaf Village back. So like I think he's pretty much got it. And another thing, if this is like a different jutsu, I'm hoping it has some pros as well, and it's not just limitations. Like for example, we understand that the previous Flying Raijin, it took like a lot of jutsu, or it took like a lot of chakra to actually pull it off. With this situation, it could be the case that it takes less chakra for him to actually pull off the Flying Raijin. So hopefully it's not just all limitations, there's some potential pros.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. As far as the limitations go, like limitations don't always mean like a bad thing. It just means maybe he can't do certain things that Minato can, but he can supplement it in a way that is just as good, but not as great as Minato was able to do it. So he may have, since he created his own with Kashin Koji, which is also interesting. I'm more curious on how Kashin Koji helped him and taught him the technique. I think I brought up in a previous podcast, I think that when he had that like moment with Ishiki, I think it was such a traumatizing moment that it triggered something in Kashin Koji where he had past memories of being Jiraiya, and Jiraiya would know things about the Flying Raijin, even if he couldn't do it himself perfectly. He still knew the mechanics of the Flying Raijin and how it worked, and gave that lesson to Boruto and let him because it was always stated that Boruto was a genius when it came to jutsu and stuff. He made his own version of the Rasengan, several versions, which Minato only created once, which took him a while, and Naruto took him a while as well. And he was able to add a nature release in it, which wasn't previously done before when the jutsu was first created. So from the beginning, since he was a kid, he was a genius, but he just didn't know it. So the flying Raijin, like Bara said as well, it may not take as much chakra. Now the markings is the big thing that I'm interested in. Maybe he can't place as many markings as Minato did. Maybe he can only use the flying Raijin with the toad, because as far as we've seen, every time he used that flying Raijin, he had that toad with him. So maybe the toad is just giving back information, or maybe the toad is the one that's actually helping him and giving him that extra hump that he needs to actually perform the flying Raijin. And that will be the limitation right there if he doesn't have the toad with him and he can't perform that technique.
Okay, so from my perspective, I think from a narrative perspective, the limitations are brilliant, in my opinion. So I think when I take a look at Kishimoto and I take a look at Boruto as a character, he has quite a bit. Right, he has quite a bit to work with. He's very powerful. He has a great many techniques and skills. But one of the major problems I had with his character was that I was afraid he'd get a little bit too much, a little too soon. So I think that could have been a problem. He could be broaching over into Mary Sue or Gary Stu territory. So I'm thinking, hey, yeah, he already is pretty OP. You gave him one of the most broken techniques in the entire verse, not to mention one of the coolest. And I think some limitations are due. I think some limitations are absolutely perfect. So from a narrative perspective, I actually think this is a plus for the character rather than a minus. Now, of course, when it comes to Kashin Koji being someone who can help him with the technique, you know, I take a look at Boruto as a genius, right? Because that is what he is. You know, you take a look at a character like a Minato Namikaze, he could not infuse nature chakra or nature release into his Rasengan. He could not figure it out. Shout out to my boy Konohamaru, who could. But Boruto Uzumaki, he can. And he can use multiple different chakra natures, almost something akin to, not quite like, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, which was a very legendary god of his era type of shinobi. So we already know he's a genius in his own right. Now, taking all of that into consideration, I do think that when it comes to Boruto mimicking like a Tobirama Senju, who is the originator of the Flying Raijin technique, I do think there are going to be limitations that even the creator had, right? Relative to one Minato Namikaze, where he admits, like, yeah, Minato's better at this technique than I am. So Minato took something that already existed and then he just compounded upon it. Boruto recreated a technique from scratch. Maybe we'll have to see time of recording. We don't have too much more information, but it's fine right now. I think he'll add things on as time goes on, but once he starts to unlock Momoshiki's power in earnest, the Karma Seal, once he gets that licked, because we saw in the flash forward scene he has that good, and of course the Jogan Eye, the Flying Raijin might just be an afterthought. So when it comes to like what he can do, the limitations, I think he can do what he needs to do and what we want to see from him using that technique, and I think that's enough, right? Like, he uses it in combat, not pretty well, damn well. Like, he's very good at it in combat. He can teleport between dimensions, which is very relevant. And I was asking myself, okay, what would be the point of him mastering Flying Thunder God? Well, he wants to assassinate the Ten Tails. So taking that into consideration, as well as the fact that he can't use his karma right now, right? It seems to be some kind of issue there. At the very least, he doesn't want to use it. That means his means of using space-time ninjutsu to even fulfill his goal is impossible, right? So he needed to master a new space-time ninjutsu technique outside of Karma's abilities, and I think this was the perfect one, paying homage to his lineage, his grandfather. So all of that kind of comes together and makes a whole lot of sense. And of course, with Kashin Koji being a member of the Kara organization, he would definitely understand what's required to get into that Ten Tails dimension to fulfill that goal. So everything just kind of comes together in a pretty cohesive way. The limitations, no problem whatsoever narratively. Kashin Koji helping, hey, listen, maybe he knows how to do it too. We'll have to see. But Boruto's definitely a genius for sure.
1000%. I want to know specifically like everything that Kashin Koji knows. With his information, it kind of gives me like the memories and flashbacks of when Mitsuki was first introduced, and we found out that Mitsuki had like all the details and all like the actual lessons that was being taught in the academy already known and memorized, and pretty much because Orochimaru like had that information downloaded inside of Mitsuki. I want to know like specifically all the intel and all the information, even like intel and backstories about jutsus that Amato potentially gave Kashin Koji, because that in itself could be like a huge wealth of knowledge that Boruto is probably like benefiting from him.
Yeah, I would imagine that Amato would want to do something with the Ten Tails, handle it or do anything at all. And with codes, claw marks being one of the two ways to get there, outside of space-time ninjutsu, how would you get there if you don't have space-time ninjutsu? And all of those like little means in which the Kara organization members could like teleport, those were all destroyed by code. So I do think that it's possible, if we're saying, you know, Koji was instilled with some kind of information about space-time ninjutsu, so on and so forth. I think it's possible. It's possible. We do know Koji uses a form of it through summoning jutsu and reverse summonings. So I definitely think there's a lane, if we're trying to theorize, that we can walk down that can get us to that conclusion. But nevertheless, I think it's all pretty interesting. And you know, these data books, they have you know, they're new-ish, I suppose, and there's a lot of them. So if you guys want to check those out, you want to see more videos from us regarding the topics in the data books or anything else, then let us know in the comments section down below. Don't forget to subscribe and rate. We appreciate all the support, guys. All right, later.